Your story matters, don't let it fade. When everything changed, you were made.
When everything changed, I was sitting in a beige office. There was generic photos of flowers hanging on the walls. I was sitting across the table from a stranger, and he had just asked for my license. I gave it to him, and I watched as he scanned it, and I saw his eyes widen. He had just learned that it was my 30th birthday that day. The way he looked up at me was a silent acknowledgement of that. Birthdays growing up for me were always my favorite. In fact, I was the kind of person that demanded birthday week instead of one day because 24 hours is simply not enough time for me to have all of the attention. This birthday week, however, started with a phone call and ended with me there, talking to that funeral director. The hardest part of my day wasn't that conversation. The hardest part of my day was having to leave there and write the obituary for my 58-year-old father. I had never written an obituary before, so that was something that was new for me and definitely not something I would ever wish upon anybody, especially on their birthday. When I was growing up, my dad and I were very different. I was too loud, too messy, too forgetful, too talkative, too what it felt like me. He was more put together. He believed everything had a place, and silly, goofy moments at home happened less and less as time went by. He had a serious job working for the local power plant, and there were a lot of times where he would bring his work home, or he had to work early hours, and we had to make sure the house was quiet. It felt like we had to walk on eggshells in order to not make a peep so he wouldn't get mad. As a hyperactive teenage cheerleader whose favorite thing was having sleepovers with her friends and giggling all night, you can safely assume that we butted heads often. As time went on, the mutual respect between us turned to zero. It wasn't until I moved away to college and then turned 21 that we realized there was something we both enjoyed doing that we could do together. And after that, we started making memories and bonding like we never had before. We went on vacations, we went snowmobiling, and most important to me, we had conversations that didn't leave me crying or grounded. That version of my dad, I only had for a few years, however, until the cancer diagnosis changed everything. That version of my dad, who I know and love, was only there for a few years until that phone call came in. It was him from the hospital telling me that he was done fighting. Writing his obituary was the hardest thing I've ever done. And what it made me learn is that obituaries don't have room for the things that matter most. There's no space to put in inside jokes or the messy moments in life learned the hard way, or lessons learned the hard way, or even those meaningful conversations between a dad and a daughter over a few beers. What I learned was that the stories that matter most don't make it to that final page. So we have to tell them now while we're still here. We have to live them out loud intentionally so that not just others can experience them, but we can for ourselves. As I was writing his obituary, it just hit me that it's just a series of milestones. It's just a list. Traditional accolades that someone reaches, where they worked, their family members, maybe a line or two about their hobbies. Writing this and going through that experience made me step back and look at myself and look at my own life. What would my obituary say at that point? What had I done in the first 30 years that would make it to that final page? And if I'm being honest with you, I didn't really like the answer. Now, from the outside looking in, I didn't have that bad of a life. I was newly engaged. My fiance and I were looking at our first home. I had graduated college and got a dream internship as a graphic designer for NASCAR. After that, I was offered something that was beyond a dream position for me, and I moved up to Wisconsin for it, where I had been living for the past 7.5 years. But the thing about dreams is that they change. And the hardest thing for me was admitting that mine had, because I had put everything I had and everything that I was into that career. I made it my identity. I skipped out on personal events so that I could get ahead in that job. I was traveling, so I didn't get to see my family all that much. And it was all just coming to a point where I realized I was no longer having fun. I no longer enjoyed what I was doing. I was coming home and complaining all the time, or I had to bring my work home because I had asked for so much responsibility and it was all bubbling up. Writing my dad's obituary made me realize, it made me look at my own legacy. What was I leaving behind? Was that job the thing that I wanted to be on that final page? So within 3 months of his passing, I quit my job the day after we paid our first mortgage payment. um, we were saving up for a wedding, so I was freelancing web design. But I also lost my grandpa on my mom's side. There was a global pandemic happening and civil unrest across the country. Now, I was going to do this right. I was going to start my business, so I went through all the things that you were supposed to do and make a business plan. And whenever there came the moment that you had to write your mission, all of it was difficult, but the mission came to me so clearly and instantly. I knew that I wanted the mission of my business to amplify the voices and ideas that deserve to be heard. And for me, my business is not just about creating websites. It's about creating ripples of change throughout the country through stories. I work with professional speakers, authors, and thought leaders in order for them to make that change and to empower them to tell their stories to more and more people so that we can create positive impact on this world. I felt so fulfilled immediately once I started working with this client. And now the best thing is I get to sit back and watch as my clients do the most incredible things. They're going on to speak internationally. They're writing best-selling books. They're starting podcasts to have conversations that matter. And they're creating communities to build an impact at scale. The coolest thing for me is that I get to sit back and know that just a little part of their story is that I got to help them. And it's not about my name being attached to any of their success. I certainly don't take any credit for it. But I know that what I'm doing every day has an impact that is far beyond me and far beyond anything that I have to have my name attached to. I feel empowered, and I don't measure my success about any award or accolade that I get. I truly get to measure my success in the quality of character of people that I get to work with. I call this living beyond the obituary, because they're telling the stories now while they're here in order to make a change so that it's not just on some paper after we're gone. And it's all about how you show up day after day, what you put your time, energy, and talents into in order for your story to impact change, whether it be on a grand scale or just convincing one person to tell their story and have the courage to do so. So what about you? When you think about your legacy, who are you right now? And are you the person that you want to be? What is keeping you back from that? From me, I had no one to lead me. My entire life, I didn't know how to forge my own path, so I'd always kind of stuck to people. I'd always followed in their footsteps and just did what they did, for better or for worse. After writing my dad's obituary and starting my business, I realized that I was doing that for worse. I realized before I quit my job, I was bringing my work home all the time. I was giving my best hours to my job, just like my dad had. And when he came home, his personal life suffered for it. I was complaining all the time, just like he did. And it just was a wake-up call that I needed. And if I could do anything now, I would want to help my younger self. I would be that person to lead her. And I would do that through telling her stories about the things that I had to learn and unlearn in order to get to where I was. The first thing I had to do was raise my standards, because I'm a firm believer that your standards are what you tolerate. And I was tolerating people giving me all of their responsibilities. I was tolerating other people demanding to have power over my schedule. And so my standards were as low as they could be when it comes to being proud of who I was, or being even an individual at that. I also learned that what you tolerate from others shapes the path that you walk. And the people that you have around you make more of an impact on who you are and what you do and your potential than you could ever know. I've realized that as I started choosing happiness for myself, there were people around me that didn't react in the way that I thought they would. They didn't react positively. And you might have those people yourself. And what I realize is that I was showing them, and you might be showing them, that there are dreams that they didn't go for. And you going for yours makes them uncomfortable because they're losing the version of you that they had come to peace with, that benefited them the most. And you know who those people are if you start listening. It's the people that make those subtle comments like, "How's your little business going?" Or, "You never come around anymore. You're so busy. I must not be important anymore." Notice how you never hear, "How can I help? What can I do?" And they don't text you first without the expectation of you responding immediately and being at their beck and call. And it was those people that I realized in my life that I had to distance myself from. And for you, it might be those people that have the most important titles. It might be a partner, a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, a best friend. But you'll hear their comments, and it will start to weigh you down. So what you have to do is decide if you are going to let them do that and start listening to them and take everything they say to you to your heart, or are you going to climb higher, out of their reach, so they can no longer drag you down? The final thing I had to do, and I had to learn in order to get to a place where I am proud of myself and my story, was I had to do the thing that I was most afraid of, and that was asking questions. I've always thought throughout grade school and high school that if you ask questions, you're showing everybody weakness or vulnerability or incompetence. I was afraid to ask questions because I didn't want anyone else to know that I had no idea what I was doing. But as an entrepreneur, having no idea what you were doing and just staying put doesn't pay the bills. So it was either get a job or face this fear. I decided to go that route just once to see if it would work. What I learned when I started asking for help is that it turns out pretty much nobody knows what they're doing. But the difference between them and me is they were at least taking a step forward, where I was frozen in fear and not doing anything about it. So I want you to ask yourself, what standards are you tolerating? What are the people? Who are the people that are around you? And what questions are you asking in order to get ahead? What is the next step that you can take in order to get towards your dream? Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't really have to be all that planned out. It just has to be forward. For me, it wasn't until I had to write my dad's obituary that I realized all of those things that I had been tolerating. And the gut punch that I had and the wake-up call that hit me was, if at that moment I had the same amount of time on earth as he did, I was already more than halfway done. Nothing will shake you to your core like that, because I questioned myself of, was I happy with it? And I knew that I wasn't. So now I live with fewer regrets. I've learned to take inventory of the impact that I'm making, not only in the world, but on the people closest to me and myself. I've learned to be more present. And if I were to write my own obituary today, I wouldn't see myself in some beige office. I see vibrancy and colors all around me. And I'm not alone. There are people around me, people that stories have become part of mine. And I know that my obituary would say something to the effect that I amplify the voices and ideas that deserve to be heard. And a side note, you better believe I have a new birthday. Now I excitedly count down every single year to the day that I went full-time in my business. And you better believe that I celebrate that for a whole week. So start today. My hope for you is that if you are not yet on that trajectory of the person that you want to be or the legacy that you want to live, that you start looking for your next best step. There's no perfect moment. Sometimes the terrain is really rocky. Sometimes it's risky. But just moving forward is the best thing that you can do so that you can become the person that you want to be and be proud of the story that it tells. Thank you.
You're